Mhm. Got it. So Nyawa, thank you. ArtsBuild, Sego, Watwego. Welcome to this circle to look at some of the work we've been doing over the last couple of years with ArtsBuild Ontario, as well as the Indigenous arts sector across Ontario. At this point, Terry Lynn is just burning a little sage and I think burning a little tobacco for the goodness coming together with one heart and one mind in a very good way to share some of this knowledge and to share parts of the 180 some voices that have gone into this work as well. So it's very much grassroots work, very much rooted in community, in grassroots movements that are connected to the revitalization of culture and our way of knowing and being as First Peoples here. I'm right now sitting here at Six Nations. I'm at the land of Santee Smith and Gahawi Dance. She's the artistic director of Gahawi Dance. And just in the theme of the work in terms of grassroots and land-based, I'm in the process of actually doing a land-based workshop right now with Santee, which is the second edition. She did that last year. And a lot of what we're looking at right now is clay. So for the first part of what we've been doing to slow ourselves down, we actually start to work in clay. And it's brilliant. It's beautiful because it does slow us down. It helps us to come to a rhythm that's more in tune with what's happening around us in creation. And so it's really wonderful to be able to do this kind of work actually here in my home territory as well. So I'm from Six Nations. I'm Mohawk and Turtle Clan. So we'll get into the document, but I'll let my colleagues also introduce themselves as well.
Yawa, JP. Sego, everyone. Skunago, Sego Guego. Terry Lynn Running Units. Gunyaka Haga British Enter Jadan. Gawena Quest, Kikawena De Gunyakari, Ashrigan Jitteron. So, hello. Thank you for coming. This is great. My name is Terry Lynn Brennan. I do identify with mixed heritage, Mohawk and British. My family also comes from Six Nations of the Grand River. I'm coming to you today from Watwanu, Goweno Gweski, Goweno Day, Gunyagari, which is Wolf Island, Long Island Standing, at the other end of Lake Ontario at the junction of the St. Lawrence River and the Gattaroquay River. It's going, coming from Lake Ontario, and so I'm very grateful that you're all here today and able to go a little bit on a journey with us towards talking about this story that we've all been on now for 3 going on 4 years, and it's great to have you join us for this hour. Alex.
Thanks, JP and Terry Lynn. My name is Alex Glass. I'm the Executive Director of ArtsBuild Ontario. I'm coming into this meeting from 44 Gaukel Creative Workspace, which is a settler-led facility built on the traditional territory of the Attawandarunk, the Anishinaabeg, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. 44 Gaukel is located in what is now Kitchener, Ontario. I think I mentioned this. And it's situated on the Haldimand Tract, land promised to the Six Nations and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River from the source of its mouth. I'm just so happy to be here with 2 colleagues, now 2 close friends. We've been on this journey and this path for, I know officially on this project for, we've been saying 3 or 4 years, such as in 5, like that's half a decade. And I'm can't wait to kind of share the origins of this project in a little bit. But it's just an exciting moment to be able to talk about paddling upstream, what has become this project. And thank you all for being here to listen.
Yeah, well, Alex, thank you. So I'll just kind of start us off a little bit on how we got to putting all of the words that we were honored to hear for those few years into one kind of short, really, um, observational journey package, if you will, and it does represent years of talking to over 180 experienced, wise Indigenous artistic voices and learning from their experiences and their stories that have expanded up to half a century. And from the time of the beginning of this, it really did become a a journey for all of us, and one that we didn't realize was taking us deeper and deeper into the history and the legacies of Indigenous spaces and the love-hate relationship that Indigenous artists have had with those in the past. But we had hoped we'd go there, and I think in many ways we did, and yet there's still so much to say and to learn on this journey as we continue to explore what we have learned to date and how to now put it into motion and put it into action, if you will, in the paddling metaphor. And so when we had got all our voices from these amazing communities across the province, both in spaces that have had that legacy with them over the years, as well as those communities that have that artistic collaborative vision amongst themselves right now to move forward in an authentic, honorable, self-determined way. Um, I was cognizant that, when Alex asked me to kind of put all of this together, I was very honored and very frightened, simply because I'm not the best writer in the world. Um, but but I was also very excited to say, okay, let me try and see if I can make sense of this in a way that is not a report. It is not a point form guidebook that's written in a way that colonial thinking would maybe expect, but rather put it in the form of a story. And because that is how we learn. That is how we all learn, really, and how we all teach is through story and through experiences and the wisdom that's gained from those experiences and how those stories are really representative of our day-to-day lives and existence and our paths moving forward. And so it really came down to understanding what we were hearing and how we were hearing it, where we were hearing it from, and how it connected to us as part of creation, but also to everything around us as part of creation here in Ontario. And through those words and those experiences, it kind of became a bit evident that there were four main focuses of what people were really needing, wanting, seeing, hearing, and experiencing. And it all comes down to that experience with land and with family and communities, and training, and doing all of that professional development, as well as regaining our ability to be partners with Indigenous partners, and collaborative family kin in a way that supports each other in this journey that we're all on. But then eventually to the reciprocity process of working with non-Indigenous allies and colleagues. Um, there's a lot of struggle to get over how we work together because we've been so divided by colonization, that it really is this path of trying to figure out how to get back to our ways and our ways of thinking and doing, which is somewhat inherent in who we are, And we know that we have to get back to the land, and we know we have to get back to recognizing our responsibilities and accountabilities to family and to community, and to the land. And so it really just came about that the exploration of all of what I was rereading through these hundreds of pages of amazing storytelling was that it metaphorically to me reflected that canoe journey. And I guess part of that is somewhat shaped because my colleague JP Longboat, who was the visionary to start this whole project, something that he's been thinking about, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but this is how I've been blessed to know this story. Is something he's been thinking about for 20 years. The struggle of Indigenous artists to work in a space that is their own, and they intrinsically feel planted in that space and know that they are identified and acknowledged in that space. And so when I was asked to be brought onto this journey 5 years ago with him, by him, I was again just taken in to understand what was happening on the spectrum of Indigenous artistry, and he's involved with a project for the last couple of years called Canoe Stories. So I think that all of our conversations with ABO have somewhat also been influenced by that journey that he's having on the waterways. And so the metaphor of us paddling upstream just kind of seemed to come to light through what we were hearing from all of these spaces, that it was like that. It was like us trying to move back into our territories in a good way, in the way that we knew how to on the waterways, to reclaim those spaces in a way that was intrinsically natural to us, and move away from those estuaries of possible birth and creativity, but they'd become muddied to a point of pollution over these 500 years of colonization. And so we need to move back into that reclaimed space of fresh water and clean water, go upstream to reclaim who it is we are and what we are with the land and with the water. And so that's kind of how I interpreted it. It's obviously not the best written document in the world, but it's a start. It's a start that somewhat came to me just naturally from what I was hearing and what we were all hearing and talking about, and it just flowed that way, literally. So yeah.
I'll just jump in as well and share a little bit about that creation process and how we modeled this. So some 25 years ago, when I was doing some study of contemporary dance through the Banff Center for the Arts and the Aboriginal Dance Training Program, even at that time, in our diversity of coming together, we recognized the need for, when people go home, to start their centers of creation. And so that's the sort of the vision that Terry Lynn is talking about. I continued on with my own career and worked within institutions and with other communities across the country. So this is really this thinking is an amalgamation of my experiences as an artist, a contemporary Indigenous artist working within a cultural context. Artists can choose to work, however they'd like, but what's fundamental to me in my practice as a Ganyaga Haga artist is that my cultural teachings and stories are what ground my practice and what ground the work that I want to bring to presentation. And so we focused on activity that was grassroots and very focused on cultural regeneration, cultural reclamation, and cultural renewal. And we went to, well, we tried to go originally to 10, but I think we got to 8 communities. And then with the legacy stories, the spaces that are already in existence, we really wanted to open a space where their story could be told and could be witnessed not only by us, and then we would bring that back to an expression, but also witnessed by the circle of their own communities, which was also very, very powerful. So we discovered a number of things along the way as we continued across Ontario, which is again a shared territory. So part of what we found we were doing is actually starting to rebuild some of these internation relationships. And as Terry has, those have been damaged by that this process of colonization. So we are also acknowledging history, the history that we've come from to this place, but opening up a space where we can start to vision forward in a way that is, to me, very rooted in reconciliation, very rooted in truth and reconciliation, so that we can come to a place where we're empowered to lead our own communities and to support and to embody what we're looking for in terms of our cultural ways on a community level. Through the arts, and again, if you talk about the arts, to me, if you're working in a cultural way, that's also rooted in oral tradition as well, which is also very different than the Western model. So how do we begin to work with oral tradition? Well, we make sure we work through storytelling and story and orator and voice, people's voices. So it was really important for us to really motivate and to empower these communities to really come together. And on the most part, it was just mind-blowing, the response we got, the commitment folks brought to those gatherings, those circles, their depth of expression and feeling, and I think that's why these set of recommendations, these set of considerations within this document are so important right now, because these are really identifying what we need as we go forward now. This is a very actionable document. We've been sort of studied to death as Indigenous people over the last few decades, okay? So let's start putting some of this into action. And that's what we're really trying to vision for this document going forward. So it's nice to be able to bring this to you and talk about it orally. We'd like to have a discussion as well. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it and can bring forward some of your thoughts and some of your questions so that we can get into some of that as well. So those are some of the elements that we sort of really began to realize. And the other thing is that when we're able to have that maybe a little bit wider view of our shared territory, of our dish with one spoon territory, then we can look at it as an ecology. We have such a rich diversity of spaces out there. Actually, we have Native Earth, we have CIT, you know, we have the Bajamajig, we have well, we got Nojum and at Trent, you know, we have Woodland Cultural Center, a really interesting and diverse mix of spaces and communities doing very, very strong work. And why can't we bring that back to our original thinking? And this is what's also reflected in the report, in that it's circular, in that it's holistic, in that it's interrelated. Everything is interrelated. And so why can't we now go forward, especially within the context of our funding process? And right now, public funding is how we fund the arts provincially and federally. How can that system then work and respond to what we've discovered across Ontario as an arts ecology? So that's also a big piece that I wanted to mention today as well, and start to put that thinking out there, rather than each space trying to survive on their own and, you know, working within a siloed context in some instances. Let's start to come together and really unify what we're doing to highlight the diversity and so that if I'm an artist, I could come into the context of Ontario and find what I need, whether that be you know, whether that be, you know, music or dramaturgy or lighting design or, you know, or whatever, so that I would be able to find what I'm looking for as an artist, wanting to work within a cultural and a grassroots way. So I wanted to add that.
Yeah, JP, thank you. I do want to apologize to everyone if you see me moving around or off screen. It's simply because I got a 2-month-old puppy on Monday, who's in my lap right now because she was eating and chewing everything that was around me on the floor, including cords and cables and trees and plants and tables. So that is why she is right now in my lap until she starts to bite me too much. So I just building there again off of JP's story there, and eloquently put as to how Indigenous artists are working today, and especially his wisdom and experience there has been the driving force behind all of this. And it was, interestingly enough, that our first conversation that we had with the community was actually at Nojam, First Peoples Space, and it was Edna Manitowopi who was the one who coined an Indigenous Renaissance as part of what she sees happening right now across the landscape. And as I was reflecting again on all that we heard, I kept coming back to that concept that it's a renaissance in a way of a rebirth, of a renewal of what Indigenous artistry is. And as JP says, that Indigenous arts ecology, which implies that relationship within and to everything in a successful way. And so, Tat, could you maybe bring up the circle diagram, if you will, to share with everybody?
Yep, 1 second.
Thank you. So in the document, we're just going to pull up the first kind of diagram that came about. Yeah, as JP again was saying, that it's all interconnected and it's all part of the same thinking. And with
Lost you. She's frozen.
Yes, she is.
Indigenous arts communities towards that space of self-determination. And I apologize that my internet is not very stable. I also have contractors in my basement, so I don't know if you can hear this. It's a great Thursday. And so, yeah, so it was part of this process that really led us and drove us to figuring out steps that as Indigenous artistic communities, we can learn to build what we need to build in a way that is healthy and individually healthy. Because as JP said, we were across the province. So what will work in Thunder Bay is not going to necessarily work at Woodland. What's going to work at Nojam might not necessarily work here in Kingston. We've got a mixture of different cultural understandings as well, and protocols and principles. And so that was a blessing to hear and to learn all of that diversity, because I think as we did come together for a final way of bundling the conversation, it just makes it stronger to know that there's all of these different opportunities to grow and to build this connected network across the province, as we hope this is a starting point to do. And so if we go into the land bundle, for instance, Tad, if you want to move forward, that is kind of the impetus for all that we heard, was connecting back to that land-based artistry, that land-based learning and teaching and relationship is inherently at the root of how our communities had always worked, lived, and were responsible to. And so it was that initial impetus that we kept hearing everywhere we went, regardless of culture, regardless of landscape. And so it was inherent that was definitely the first place to start to root, literally and figuratively, a way of self-determining and sovereignty for Indigenous artists, and building that arts ecology across the province.
And often a real need and desire to regather those stories, to refine those stories, and what I'm really realizing, and it's the work here has really reminded me of that, and it's in our languages. It's not enough just to acknowledge creation. You can, it's not enough. We do in our ceremonies and in our Thanksgiving address and our ways. It's not enough just to acknowledge. You actually have to put that into action, and our way of being. So to me, the stories are really connected with that. And so there's everywhere we went, we found just a real commitment and engagement with that kind of process. She's gone. Gary Lynn.
I know that new puppy is full of unexpected surprises right now for her.
Doing on the wires, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the text within the bundle of the land here, and if there's anything else I can add. I mean, if we're talking about healthy cultures, if we're talking about healthy indigenous cultures, we have to have that connection to the land in place, the places of our people and the places of our traditional histories. We have to have that, because that's what our cultures are built upon. And again, it was reminded through some of the language work we're doing here, is that our relationship, our fullness of the relationship that we have with creation, is not expressed in English. You can't actually express it in English, because it's deep, and in many ways it's even heart-centered. So we even talk about the idea of love, and that love for all aspects of creation. So that's just an example of when we talk about relationship with the land or relationship with place. That's how deep it is for us, and that's how real it is for us. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, JP, for taking over there. Sorry, P necessity, not mine. So, and from the place of land, it was definitely from, moving into that connection with land is all about health, healing and health. And so it just tumbled into this process that reconnecting to land and reclaiming land in a sovereignistic way can then bring a form of just, as JP said, love, love back within our communities, back within ourselves and with each other in relationship. And it was just a natural fluidity of creating that reciprocity between individuals, and then back with the land and with the water and with the air. And so that just became another bundle of understanding the reconnection and the purposes of why we do a lot of art. Sometimes it is for aesthetic beauty, and because it is aesthetically beautiful, but a lot of times it's also also about understanding relationships and understanding healing and understanding ceremony and understanding how that all connects. And so it's important to reconnect with that. JP, do you want to talk at all about this particular point? Okay. You're on mute.
It just reminds me, I was just thinking of another story that when I was on Tyendinaga very recently, we were able to listen to a basket maker, right? And you talk about the aesthetics and the form and the complete integration of function as well as beauty. So the basket that fascinated me most was the corn washing basket. The corn washing basket is a certain size. there's just a certain amount of gaps in the basket that'll wash the corn, and the form and function are just so intertwined, as well as the relationship with the creation of that basket in terms of harvesting the natural materials, the craft even in harvesting those natural materials. And if we talk about today in the contemporary situation we're in right now, a lot of these basket makers cannot get the black hash they need because our forests are under siege in many ways, right? So when you talk about holistic and we talk about our art forms, you can continue to weave that web right around any of our art forms. And Santi talks about pottery, and she talks about how the knowledge is passed on from generation to generation. This is also another part of our healthy process of sharing knowledge. Our elders will often say we have a knowledge economy, not a money economy. And just being within this environment here and coming to a place where we are able to listen to these traditional knowledges is just really exactly what we're trying to do here, is to find a way to continue to open those spaces for the sharing of that traditional knowledge.
And to back on that, absolutely, in the sense of understanding that we Indigenous artists are not and don't want to be trapped by the transactional processes that art is often and most times reduced to across this nation. And
most recently,
it's about
most recently, as we've come into a kind of contemporary context with our art, right?
Yeah.
Becomes in a way commodified, yeah.
And so it's about relationships. It's about building relationships and relationships to all things again. That is part of the process. But it also became very clear moving, into the third bundle, that the access to the same opportunities that non-Indigenous artists have had over the years has proven to put Indigenous artists at a disadvantage. So although we have not had that connection to land and we're having those broken community relationships, it just then trickles to the fact that Indigenous artists are not thought about or valued in the same way that non-Indigenous artistry is. And so we don't have the same level of, on ratio or percentage for Indigenous peoples across this country that the non-Indigenous arts ecology or community works with, that are producers, that are directors, that are behind the scenes, that are, working in makeup, that are working in lighting. We don't, it's difficult to find these people today. If you want to build an Indigenous process and an all Indigenous part of working within the arts. And so the third bundle really became about not only creating our own programs that train in a way that is inherently meaningful and connected to Indigenous ways of knowing and being, but also having folks understand the retribution of funding applications and funding organizations, and how to not be put into a box in the same way is a challenge. It really puts Indigenous artists at a disadvantage all the way across. And so the funding and resources, training and mentorship became that third level, if you will, of understanding the processes of how to continue to build that self-determination and that sovereignty within the arts ecology.
By honoring our training methodologies, which I would say have not really found a deep support within the funding constructs that's out there, right? The funding agencies and institutions have been developed on a Western model with Western values. And so part of this understanding of what we've come to now is that we have to be able to find space, make space for our training methodologies to start to be activated. And as we start to activate those, then they can also develop as well. So we haven't given our training methodologies the support they've really needed over a number of decades. And I think that's another area, yes, that's really important to look at going forward. I'm competing with her dog. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, you know, so it's that idea that our method, we have our methodologies, our training methodologies, but we also are in a place where we need to develop those as well and to advance those as well. And that takes investment. So we need to find a way to bring the values that we that support our methodologies into that system of funding and support, you know, so that they're understood and so that they're really supported and responded to. Yeah.
And with that all being said, then it comes around to that sense of reciprocity. Where are we at today as artists and as sovereign artists if we don't recreate our relationships with each other? And in the document, you know, I reference the Two-Row Wampum Treaty, which is the first of the treaties between Indigenous and non-Indigenous. But there's also those treaties that existed long before that one in 1613, of the treaties that existed between nations, such as the Dish with One Spoon. And for those of us who are on the North Lake Ontario border or you know, shoreline, we are all part of that Dish with One Spoon treaty that still exists between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe. And it basically was created in a way that I think folks need to respect the relationship that can be forged between nations, and in this case could be forged between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, in the sense that to respect each other is to respect and share what we have and understand what we don't have, and then provide a reciprocal relationship to balancing out that access, that ability to gain and to learn and to grow. And so for the Dish with One Spoon, if folks who don't know about it, basically was metaphorically representing that the dish is one, is all of this land that we share here on the North Shore of Lake Ontario. And there's a spoon or an implement that is not one of aggression. It's not a fork or a knife, implying that we share in a healthy way and in a good way. And we understand that what one nation needs to survive, the other nation also needs that same amount to survive, or in an equitable way, what is the consistency across nations. And it really is a great reminder for humans to understand their humility, or to at least own up to their humility as not the top of the food chain in this relationship, in the sense that we are not the most important thing on the planet, and we need to understand and respect all of other creation. And I certainly often tell folks, everything else will survive and grow without us. You know, as human beings, we are not needed for the ecology of the world to continue to grow. But as humans, we need everything else around us to be healthy for us to exist. And that is what it kind of comes down to in understanding reciprocity and coming back to the point of relationship building with the land, with the water, with the sky. And with the Two-Row Wampum, coming then to that 1613 you know, historic moment where the Dutch and the Kanien'kehá:ka of what is now New York State exchanged a relationship wampum, which is a treaty, which is a, you know, a contract to acknowledge each other and share the landscape, share the waterways, share the resources, but not to interfere with each other and how they are living in regards to their governance, in regards to their education, in regards to their faith. And it was something that is a commonality between what was before that, between nations, and that relationship of self-determination and allowing your neighbors to have that self-determination. And it was building off of that. JP?
It just reminds me of all kinds of, sort of stories we've been sharing. And someone asked, why does the Haudenosaunee go counterclockwise? And we everyone sort of brought their own take on that. And then I was sitting with my mom the other night talking about it, and she said, you know what? If we look at the beans, because we grow the corn, beans, and squash together, if we want to look at these earth patterns and these earth ways that are universal, the beans go up the corn stalk in a counterclockwise way. So, as Haudenosaunee people, also we were given our original instructions. Is actually part of what we're talking about here. That's completely related to reciprocity. So our original instructions are about greetings, love and respect. Actually, it's right in the language. It's about greetings, love and respect to all of creation, and other human beings are part of that as well. So we had that through all of our relations. Yeah. And that's what changed also with the years of and process of colonization.
I think for me, it's always very important to reflect that 500 years is a long time to have your ways of knowing, being, and thinking basically stripped from your whole psyche. So to reclaim that and get back to something that looked like that is a vision that we can hope we get close to achieving. But the reality is, as we lose our ancestors and our elders and our leaders, the further we get from understanding what that original intention was. And so all the more reason to really afford an opportunity for Indigenous peoples to reclaim that reciprocity so that we don't get any further away from those original intentions of what it was and how we did connect with each other and how we did connect with the land. Because reality is showing that those types of relationships with each other and the universe, and the earth, was much healthier than the relationships that have been forged over the last 500 years with colonization. And so there's a lot to be learned on that process of allowing for that knowledge to come to the forefront and to come to the surface of the water to flow again, coming back to the metaphor of paddling upstream and reclaiming all of the knowledge that goes with that journey and in all facets of our survival.
So why are we talking about all of this? Well, because it's completely related to our creativity, to our art making, to our expression of who we are as Haudenosaunee or Anishinaabe or or Cree or Ojibwe, because it's all interrelated, and these are some of the foundations of our people and our cultures.
Fabulous. Thanks, JP. As
There's
you
a lot of
can see,
mosquitoes here. Sorry, there's a lot of mosquitoes here.
See, I've got a dog, you've got mosquitoes. As again, I appreciate so much those of you who came to hear about this today. And as you can see, it wasn't scripted. It was really ad hoc. And that's kind of how we work. It's not the formality, but it's what is being offered, right? It's the information of sharing and how to share it in a way that is humbling and respectful, and as JP says, with love and the intention of love. So we hope maybe we provided some answers to what your curiosity was piqued with paddling upstream. Hopefully, Paul had the chance to maybe read it, and think about it, and then talk with your Indigenous neighbors and your Indigenous community folks to figuring out, where are they in this process, and learn from them what from this document is really their starting point, because you don't start with one bundle necessarily and go to, and follow along. It's not linear, it's cyclic. And everything is interflowed. And again, every community on this landscape is going to need different things at different times through the process of that sovereignty reclamation. So
Take some
thank you.
points of discussion, or we'd love to hear some of that.
Before we open it up, I did want to
Okay.
say a couple things.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about the project's origin for a second, and a little bit about our relationship with ArtsBuild administratively holding this project as a settler-led organization, and how self-determination has been built in from the get-go. So first off, there are so many voices and perspectives around the need for Indigenous creative spaces across Ontario. The idea for the project was conceived in early 2019. It all started from a call from JP to me. He was in Ottawa, I was in Kitchener. I remember you wanted to build an Indigenous performance art space, and you wanted to know, how can I do this meaningfully? And I said, I don't know, but I want to help.
We were looking at renovating or sort of claiming a space that was becoming available on a community level, but because of all of the red tape and ownership would be outside of that, and investment, and the fact that we really actually systemically not able to bring forward the kind of space we're envisioning, which is more of a circular space, a space that's built more on our models of performance, that we weren't able to do it. And that sent me on another trajectory to also, as I realized, well, why am I feeling I need to do that within a city or within an urban context? And that really propelled me into some other thinking. And that's why we wanted to go forward and to really look at where we are and what's happening on these levels in terms of creative space.
Yeah, after your call, I quickly looked at our resources and realized, boy, these are all embedded in westernized systems, and these are not helpful at all. So we better re-examine things and start from the beginning. Yeah, we quickly realized evaluation metrics and grants, which are mentioned in Paddling Upstream, and even the design of art spaces. Early on, we talked about a proscenium design versus an Indigenous theater circular design, and how it's just, it does not match the way that the world is experienced, and the values. So with no other resource or culmination of stories around Indigenous space, land, or sovereignty, we decided to figure it out ourselves. So we knew the stories were out there. We could put them together and hear directly and work directly with Indigenous communities across the ecology of Ontario to connect further around space and land and the arts.
But not in a extractive way.
No.
We're not going into the community to pull out the knowledge. All we did was created the space for the community to come together to share with that intention, right?
Yeah, it's super important to distinguish that, because really, it did create some connections, but we quickly learned as we started down the path of this project that it was really the circle that really guided all of the materials and the direction and the purpose and the intention of this work. It was really deeply embedded into those communities individually.
Because we engaged leaders who came forward within each community.
Mm-hmm.
They understood what we were trying to do, and they were the ones who led their own community and gathered their own community, right? And then they would be able to speak on behalf of their community throughout the process, right?
And that was something that we really had to define again and again throughout this work because of the typical relationship. ArtsBuild's priority for undertaking this work was and is decolonization in cultural space. I really believe as an organization centered around space, we need to acknowledge the land, the first peoples, and we needed to dedicate, our capacity and resources towards making sure that was put forward, that self-determination was put at the forefront of this work.
Oh yeah.
But secondly, so firstly, for the communities, right? Secondly, on the periphery, it's for others who are looking to support this work too, to get to understand, to see how they can be effective allies and funders, and to see how they could adjust the resources, processes, and programs to better support Indigenous artists, organizations, and communities. So with all this in mind, we brought together our colleagues and the circle was formed. That has been with this project like 4 or 5 years, which is kind of incredible. I say that to our funders all the time, like, we've had a lot of these voices on the journey with us for a long time. And then we put forward a proposal. It was funded by Heritage, thank you, Canada Council, thank you, Ontario Arts Council, thank you. And so for 4 years, so we're in our last leg of it. But I do want to say, paddling upstream is just such a wonderful culmination of all the voices and the conversations, the travel, the circles the fires we've sat around. It's really quite an extraordinary thing for all of this to have come together. JP and Terry Lynn, of course, thank you so much. I'll thank everyone in a moment officially. But I do wonder, for those who are identify or are not Indigenous and are from settler-led organizations, you may be wondering, how can you action the bundles of knowledge that have been shared in the document? And JP, you mentioned that it's quite an actionable pathway that's been laid out. Now, I don't pretend to have the answer for you, but I do have a frame of reference we can start from. And I always, whenever I do this work, look at the Indigenous Ally Toolkit from the Montreal Indigenous Community Network, which starts by saying being an ally is not a badge of honor, it's a sign of privilege. So, you're looking at this path, knowing where you're coming from, the privileges that you have in these systems, and really what can we do to make sure that the challenges that are brought forth in the bundles of knowledges are not perpetuated, that we're breaking down those barriers. So part of that process, to be better allies and accomplices, that I always really keep in mind is acknowledge the fact that you're a guest in this land. And that this is a lifelong process rooted in action, requires humility and ongoing critical self-reflection. I would say that's paramount in this project. Oh my goodness, there were so many moments of leaning into uncomfortable truths, listening to histories, and really being present and actioning the ways that you can help, and just that ongoing conversation. This circle between the ArtsBuild team, JP and Terry Lynn, we meet every week on this project because it is always evolving, and the learning is ongoing. So I would say that's one place you can start. There are many resources out there. We're also holding an allyship in space workshop in winter 2023 or 2024. Oh my gosh, what is time? 2024, that we invite everyone to attend. There'll be an online component as well if you're not able to make it in person, but we'll be really looking at paddling upstream in comparison and seeing where we can start, and working through that together. And then my long list of acknowledgements, which feels like a little bit like an award speech. Thank you. It's not like that. But first off, and I don't want to take up too much time, a big thank you to Terry Lynn for your work in weaving together what has become paddling upstream. It's been a large undertaking to combine so many stories, voices, and perspectives and uncover a path forward for the sector. So that's huge. So thank you. And then to JP for your guidance and vision, your ongoing vision that's been unwavering for many years. You believe in this work and that comes through. in all of this. So it's been a privilege to work with both of you throughout this entire time. And you both are so generous in your offerings. So thank you. I also want to acknowledge the circle, the advisory circle, who's been with us as well. Jen Cole, Linda Trudeau, Rose Stella, Sid Bob, Penny Cushi, Janice Montour, Joanna Bertie, Tarkalee Partridge, Shelby Gagnon, Laura Northway, and Sebastian DeLine. Thank you as well to the elders and knowledge keepers and community gathering and legacy story partners. And the ABO team, Helena and Tat, you are lovely, as well as past members, Diane and Amy, who contributed to this. That is all of my portion that we have planned for today. And I think we can open it up for discussion if Terry Lynn and JP, if you're ready for that.
Sure. Yep.
We realize we're at 2:30. So it's been an hour and a good one at that. But if you want to throw your questions in the chat box, we can read them out. And if you require a microphone, we can definitely accommodate that as well.
And I didn't necessarily intend to put a plug in for Ontario Presents, but I will just say that as Alex was explaining a bit about the relationship with growing with JP, the two of them joined a series called Cedar Tea Breaks for Ontario Presents back in June and offered their story in a YouTube video. The link is right there. If you want to learn more about Indigenous, non-Indigenous relationships and how they can form, how you can start your own, and just perhaps get some ideas for that as well.
We've told that story in a few different areas, JP, over the years.
Yeah, I guess if people are feeling shy or they don't have the time right now, I think we'd still be available to field questions somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, we can definitely when we share the recording, do the project email. And then I
see John Ryerson's hand there.
Oh.
Yeah. Hi there. I wouldn't want you to get away without a comment, at least. First of all, I want to just mention that TPO, the agenda, has had a whole week this week on architecture. And the episode I listened to today with the Indigenous architect, and I'm sorry I don't have her name at my fingertips, who designed the Algoma College project. And it was wonderful to listen to how she decolonized the design to incorporate, nature, even things like staircases, use of light. It was quite remarkable. I just wondered where you see in our, you're talking about the need for education and learning, and this is not just in the arts, obviously, but which colleges or universities get it? Where is their strength?
Great question.
Yeah, and thank you for that question, John. As someone who does work in conjunction with the Academy and has for a long time, I can be very critical here in the sense that most spaces don't get it at all, and that's just got to do with a longer term legacy piece of who the Board of Governors or the Senate actually demographically represents for most institutions, and therefore it follows through to how our colleges and universities across this province have been forced. And I mean, I certainly can't speak outside of Ontario to any great extent, as I am familiar with the Ontario situation with the Ministry of Education here, and how many colleges and universities, especially in this province, have been forced to become a business. And again, it emphasized that transactional model of relationships with their students, and therefore things like Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and the adaptation or adoption of Indigenous equitable approaches from strategic planning to policy and procedural corrections, let alone visibility on the landscape and incorporation of Indigenous professors, Indigenous elders, and Indigenous ways. It's a real rewrite of a system that is inherently written as a colonial framework. So I know spaces are trying, and I know spaces are having these conversations. I've participated with a number, and I've supported and helped the creation of these conversations for a few institutions across this province. But it's going to take a lot of time. And it really has to become a shift in who is at the decision-making tables and who are the leaders of these institutions towards, taking that Indigenous toolkit that Alex is talking about, which is a brilliant 7-page document that came out of Rideau in Montreal, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. I can't find it online anymore, but it was just a really beautiful, simple way for non-Indigenous folks to start to become humble with their place in this relationship. And if more trustees and more principals, started to read that and then started conversations with their local Indigenous community leaders, with time, that adoption of Indigenous, interweaving would begin, or begin in a good way, because there's a lot of tokenism out there right now, and it's actually a lot of it's fraught. It's very fraught. That's my 2 cents.
Maybe this is the next project for us in terms of starting to approach those spaces. But right now, I think we need to focus on building our own, strengthening our own within our people, so that we're ready to meet these challenges going forward. I don't believe that the institutions are really going to bring us back to our cultural ways of being. So they can help to educate for sure, but our cultural context is different than an institutional learning model.
It's been interesting for me watching the Stratford Festival evolve, as it started out with, gender and color blindness, sort of simplistic approaches, and now in the last 2 seasons, their involvement with I can't speak to that, with Black and gay, trans people. They have, in their program, they show that they've brought consultants in to advise, to help them interpret what that means, so that they're not institutionally just playing on the stereotypes or the expectations of the director.
Yeah,
that's quite a shift for a big institution, I would say.
Well, and John, just to kind of add to that, actually, Keith Barker, a very well-respected Métis producer, director, artist himself, was hired to lead the Indigenous Theatre of Stratford a year and a half ago. And under his guidance, again, another very well-respected director, producer, and artist herself, Yvette Nolan, has put together she put together a show for last year's Stratford Festival, and she's put together another one this year. So the things are moving, things are shifting, definitely, but there needs to be way more of it, for sure. And it is fabulous for Stratford. I think it's amazing to see this happening at Stratford. And I think, the NAC, the National Arts Centre, has created an Indigenous theatre, the first of its kind, and I think not only in Canada, but possibly a wider field, the world. These things are happening, but it's now shift. We have to shift more from that tokenistic implementation of people and identities towards leadership. And I do think it's possible. It's just going to take time.
Okay, anyone else? These are great links. Thanks for the links, folks. These are great.
We can also share contact information as well when we follow up with everyone. So if questions come to you
Mhm.
as you read
Yeah.
the document paddling upstream, or after this conversation today, we can definitely get back to you that way as well.
Yeah, if you feel like you want to engage, you know, hit us up.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I'll go. Thank you so much for listening today and for sticking around even after the hour's up. So, so much appreciated.
Mhm.
Thanks everyone. And thanks again to JP and Terry Lynn, and everyone who's made this paddling upstream possible. Again, to our funders, Department of Canadian Heritage, Canada Council for the Arts, and Ontario Arts Council. And then, yeah, we'll keep everyone apprised of any other opportunities related to this project through our e-news. In the meantime, I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their day. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.